Okay, I don't care if you make a whole new folder for it. I don't care if
You're not supposed to shower every day.
it is up to you guys.
You don't use shampoo.
You're not supposed to wash your
Well,
hair.
your body, but you're not
Yeah,
supposed to
that's
shower.
true.
Sorry,
You don't
sorry. You're
have to
supposed
wash your
to not to wash your hair.
Not wash your body.
Wait. Is it library?
I can't do this.
Lightroom. We're starting in Lightroom.
I shower every single day. I shower every single day.
Sorry. I meant wash
Okay.
your hair.
All of the things that we do in Lightroom could theoretically be done in Photoshop. It's just since you guys are accustomed to editing in Lightroom, I'm going to kind of expand your knowledge of Lightroom here. Then we're going to move into Photoshop for the things we can't do in Lightroom. Okay, which is my general workflow. My general workflow is always to start in Lightroom, and anything I can't do in Lightroom I take into Photoshop. And so that's my recommended workflow for you. All right. So Paulina's getting the photo imported. There it is. Okay, so we're going to start here. We're going to go ahead and move to develop. And you need to stop me if I'm moving too fast. We should all have a photo in Lightroom. Yeah.
Wait, give me a second.
I haven't done it yet.
The picture is pretty good to start with, right? So the better your picture image is to start with, the better your final product is going to be. And Paulina, actually, if you wanted to, if you have the original, your edit might actually turn out better because we're editing a lower resolution of the image.
Do you want me to pull up the original?
Yeah, why don't you pull up the original?
What?
Oh, I get my.
Might have to go back to the library.
Oh,
That's not good. Yeah, so then I was looking around the bathroom, so it's here, so like I looked and it was huge. And so like I was in the bathroom, and I was all over my hands, and I was like, and then
did you know?
Oh, the ones I was watching yesterday. But I have a wish. Where did
I feel like I know.
but then,
I should be watching this on my school.
my dad took me to the CVS and got Hello Kitty Band-Aids, and I got Chipotle, and I just.
Right, the pictures folder.
The pictures? Oh.
She came to school today for the ball.
Wait,
See everything on my computer.
didn't you already use this?
This one.
It was like this big.
I think this is the
Is that the
original.
one?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the
Oh.
edited.
I like in the middle.
I shouldn't run this.
All right. So from Paulina's iteration of her photograph, so it's already pretty good to start with, right? The lighting's generally pretty good. She's communicated her message fairly well. We're just taking it to that next level. We're learning how our editing can push things to the next level. All right. Now, one of the things we need to understand is that when we go to print, everything ends up being darker. So I did bump the overall exposure a little bit. So she's currently at plus 0.1. I put the edited version, which you guys have, up to 0.75. So she's probably going to be at 0.85 or something. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is get a little bit more of her face out of the shadows. We can add contrast later, we can bring in some highlights, we can do some other stuff in a moment, but mainly I'm trying to get that taken care of. All right, the next thing that I'm concerned about is that if you look, things that are supposed to be white are actually yellow. And that can happen a lot when we're utilizing something that's not a strobe, or if we're using this kind of light, that's going to be very yellow. So even though we're going to modify the color tones a little bit to make it look more vintage, I want to start from a sort of corrected color space. So So we're going to come up here to the white balance, and my suggested method is to take the eyedropper, okay, and you're going to come over to something in the photograph that should be a neutral gray. So if we look at her wall in the background, the flag, I'm actually going to want it to feel like it has that kind of aged, faded look to it. So I don't really want to use the white in the flag because I do want that to be a little bit yellowed. The background though, however, should be a neutral gray. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And you should see all of the colors shift to be a little bit more corrected. So the white in her jacket now is actually white. The white on the flag is still tinged, still kind of that vintage look, so that's getting closer to what we want. She ended up with about -15, -1 on the temp and tint. So you notice that it automatically adjusts the temperature and the tint based on where she clicks with the eyedropper. Okay, now that area cannot be white when you click with the eyedropper because white has no color to it, right? So it doesn't know if it's white, it can't adjust the color. So it has to be a neutral gray area. So we could pick some place on her jacket, any one of those darker tones that aren't actually white, that are a gray. So go ahead and click there, and it will again try to adjust the color based on what color it sees in that area. Okay, the next thing that I did was I really tried to pull back some of the highlights. So if we go over to our highlights here, pull that back, because if you look at underneath her chin, it's getting a little bit blown out there. So I went all the way back to -100, I think, on this. All right, shadows. We are losing quite a bit in her hair. There's a lot of detail lost. There's some shadows that I wanted to bring up. And so our shadows I brought up to 61, which since she already had decreased her shadows, we're not gonna go that far with hers. So you guys can go to 61 on yours. Let's go to, I don't know, 30. Okay, her whites, we're going to pull back as well. She's currently at -2. We're going to pull those back to let's go to -75 and see what that looks like. Okay, that's good. So her chin now doesn't look quite as blown out, right? The highlight that's hitting her chin isn't getting fully blown out. It just looks a little bit more faded. Perfect, okay, but everything got a little bit too light. We've lost some contrast here, so we're gonna bring in some blacks. Take the blacks to -50. Okay, so we've corrected the white balance problem. We've still got a little bit of the vintage look here. We're going to push the vintage look further. So now we're done with the basics that you guys are all familiar with. I just wanted us all starting from the same starting point. Okay. We're going to skip tone curve for now. That's another way of working with brightness, contrast, and things like that, and also messing with color. I'm going to save that for a different lesson. We're going to skip to the color mixer. So let's go to the color mixer now. Lightroom used to have a different way of mixing colors where it gave you a specific orange, red, magenta, purple, blue, cyan, things like that. They're no longer doing that. They actually let you choose which color you want to start to manipulate, which is what I like. And so we are going to take a eyedropper here. Let me remind myself of where I am. Oh, I forgot a few things. Sorry, can we go back up to the presence section up here. Okay, I bumped the clarity to about 10. So take clarity to 10. I dehazed by plus 27. And then I desaturated by minus 32. Okay, so the reason I started to desaturate, if you notice, all of the stuff we did up until that point actually really intensified the colors and made it look too modern for Paulina's particular look, and we're trying to make it look more vintage, more Norman Rockwell-ish. So the super intense colors that we got by dehazing and some of the other things, we're trying to remove by desaturating. Okay, so we're heading back in the right direction. Now we are back down to the color grade, not color grading, sorry, color mixer. And there are a couple of colors that we want to make look more vintage. So let's go ahead and start with this blue out here. So the blue in the flag on her back, we're going to choose that. Choose one of the lighter highlights in there. Don't go into the shadows because I think the shadows almost drop to black, so it's not really going to gather any color information. We want to get something in the highlight area. So grab one of the highlighted blues. Go ahead and click. Okay, so we got it. So she took a sample, and that sample shows up in the color mixer right here. Okay, so there are a number of different ways that she can control what that color looks like. And right now, it's a little bit almost purpley, a little bit too royal. It's too intense of a blue for a vintage look. And so what we can do is we can start to shift the saturation and shift the hue. So let's go ahead and desaturate this a little bit so it starts to look a little bit more navy instead of royal. That's pretty good. Let's shift the hue a little bit. Go to the left. That's pretty good right there. So that navy no longer looks like this intense glowing blue, which happened because of all the other edits that we made. We've now made it a little bit more vintagey blue. Okay, the next color we want to modify is the red on her jacket. So again, select a red, some kind of mid-tone to highlight tone. You don't want too dark or too light, you want kind of the mid-tone. So she selected that. And we're going to do kind of the same thing. This time with the reds, we're going to make it a little bit more orangey. Because again, we're going for that vintage look. As colors deteriorate, they fade, right? So we're going to turn it a little bit more orangey. So the hue shift should go to the right, let's say about plus 10, 12, yeah, that's good. And then take the saturation shift and pull that back to minus, I want to go too far, let's go minus 10. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so we still have the HSL controls when we're manipulating our colors. It's just we have more fine-tuned control because we have a specific color we're selecting from our image rather than just taking a global red or a global blue. I have a specific red that I'm modifying. Okay, so HSL stands for hue, which means am I making the red more orange? Am I making the red more magenta or purpley, right? Saturation shift, am I intensifying the colors or de-intensifying the colors? And then lumosity shift is, am I making it brighter or darker? Her jacket is plenty dark right now, so I think we're gonna go ahead and leave that. Now we're going to take the eyedropper one more time and we're going to select the colors in the flag on the wall. Just the reds, sorry. The blue in the flag on the wall is nice and navy, it's deep, it's good, we're fine there. The red in the flag on the wall has started to become a little bit washed out. So we're going to go ahead and pull the lumosity back. So it's going to darken those reds. I would go even more, Paulina. Let's go to -50. But since it's your photo, you're welcome to do it to taste. Okay. All right. It started to add maybe a little bit too much black, so we can increase the saturation. They're already a little bit orangey, so that's pretty good. It's about where we want them. All right, so we're done with the color mixer. So the color mixer is brand new in this version of Lightroom, so if I had ever taught you how to mix colors before, this is the new way to use the color mixer. I like it a lot better. It's a lot more specific. Okay. So I think I showed you guys, remember Color Pop? Paul Luna's Color Pop, where it has the blue only show up? This is a way to do it. You can intensify that one color and then click on the other colors and remove the saturation from those. So I think the way I showed you originally was using the HSL sliders. That's now this. So those are gone. This is what's replaced it. Okay, let's go ahead and collapse the color mixer, and let's go down to color grading. So color grading's become this huge popular buzzword term in cinematography, in photo editing. These controls actually come from video editing. The main thing you need to know is that what color grading does is it adds color to midtones, shadows, or highlights. And you can shift the tone of the image or mood of the image by adding colors to those shadows, midtones, highlights. Now what I suggest is that most of you avoid the midtone shift because that's going to do some weird things. And unless you have really good control over your color mixing, that's going to not be what you want to have happen. But I am going to tell you what the most common way of handling color grading, and that is to add cool tones to the shadows, which kind of deepens the shadows, makes them recede a little bit more. Okay? So if we take this center color bar and drag it into the blues or purples, it's going to start to add some blue to the shadows. Now we don't necessarily want to go too intense with that. So the closer you bring it to the middle, the less saturated the colors are going to be that you're adding to the shadows. So Pauline is actually in a pretty good place right here. And then we're going to warm up the highlights. So again, a common way of color grading is to add cool tones to the shadows, add warmth to the highlights. Warm colors advance, cool colors recede. It's just a way that we visually know things. So Paulina adds a little bit of the yellow tones into the highlights. We'd probably go, to your taste. She's added kind of a golden yellow, and she's increased that, and that's starting to warm up the highlights on the image. Okay, and in those, beneath each one is a slider. So let's go to the highlight slider, drag that one to the right real quick, just slam it all the way to the right for now. Okay, slam it all the way to the left. So you can see how it's kind of affecting the image by sliding it back and forth, and then you can control what is considered highlights, how it's adding yellow to those highlights, and then shadows as well. Okay, so we've got our color grading going on. Again, it's adding color to the shadows and the highlights in order to give the photo a specific look. A popular look in cinema is this kind of cyan blue in the shadows with a kind of orange in the highlight area. Cyan and orange is kind of a cinematic look. I've seen a lot of photographers who like deep forest greens in the shadows, and and then they use kind of a cream color in the highlights to warm it up a little bit. So that's some color grading that you can do. All right, we're done with color grading. Let's shift down to detail really quick. Now, Paulina had adequate light in this scene, so despite the fact that she shot at 3200 ISO, I still don't see a lot of noise in the shadows. But if I did see noise, this is where I would fix it in the detail section. Okay? So we'll go ahead and skip that. Go ahead and close lens corrections, close transform. Okay, we're going to look at effects. So part of the concept that Paulina had was to make this kind of a twisted vision of what the old Americana was supposed to be. So I actually wanted to darken the corners a little bit. We like the light coming from the bottom because it alters the mood of the photograph, but I want to darken the corners and focus our attention here. So we're going to do that through a vignette. Drag your vignette, post-crop vignetting, to the left. When you drag it to the left, it adds black to the corners. When you drag it to the right, it adds white to the corners. So let's go to about, about 27, 30, somewhere around there. Okay, so that helps to focus our attention in the middle, right? I kind of dub that as the cheater method of focusing your viewer's attention into the middle of your photograph because it darkens the outer edges, which takes our attention away from the edges and focuses it in the middle. All right, so we are essentially done. No, we're now ready for our masks. Sorry, let's get to our masks. So go up to the little mask button, which is the circle with the dotted outline. And there are a few masks that we're going to do. So number one, I wanted it to, and Paulina can decide if she likes this or not, I wanted a kind of a top glow to this to make it look like the light was coming from the heavens because, you know, the United States is God's country and we wanted this like glow to come up here, right? So if we're trying to play on that ideology, right, we're going to go ahead and add a linear gradient up here. Okay, we're going to click at the top and drag down to about, I don't know, a quarter of the way through. Click and drag down. And if you want to hold down the shift key, it'll stay perfectly straight, perfectly vertical. That's good right there. Okay, so this is a mask. The pink kind of shows you what is being affected by the mask. And since nothing is currently applied in the mask, you need that pink to even see where the mask is. The moment we start modifying, it will actually, the pink will disappear and you'll actually start seeing what your changes are doing. So we're going to take the exposure, and we're going to increase the exposure there to about, let's do +1 for now and see what that looks like. We might go 1.5 and see what that looks like. Take it to 1.5. Just 1.5 too much.
Yours is only.
It's not even letting
Oh,
you.
there we go.
Okay. All right, does it look like it's glowing from above? The lights from the heavens have come down upon the American flag and whatever. It's still not letting you
Wait, how do you, where
do
do you use
1.5,
that?
not 1.05.
Which mask is there?
Oh.
I did.
There you go. All right. So the light from the heavens are coming down, and we're going to add the opposite direction, and we're going to add some darkness to the bottom. So we're going to take another gradient. Once we've added the mask, in order to create a new mask, I have to go to the mask palette. So I have to click on the plus icon, and it now gives me the same selections I had before. So we're going to take another linear gradient and pull that from the bottom, and then you're going to darken the bottom of the image.
And what is your end? So 0.1.
Wait, that much?
Again, if I move too fast, yeah, that's pretty good. If I move too fast, let me know. Paulina's getting it pretty quick, so, and obviously I know what I'm doing, so I move fast. So please let me know if I'm moving too fast. Okay, so we're going to darken the exposure at the bottom. Let's go ahead and take that to -1. Okay, so obviously the same effect that I did with the vignette, I could theoretically do with the mask. That's all a vignette is doing. It's kind of masking and darkening. And I'm actually combating a little bit of what the vignette is doing using that top linear gradient. So it is creating some interesting shapes in the darkness of the shadows. Okay, so we're done with that. The next step for me, and this, sometimes I do it in Photoshop, but since Lightroom's getting better at doing this, I actually did it in Lightroom. So we're going to do this here. I want the highlights on her face and her hair to pop more. It's going to give her more separation from the background. So again, your goal as a photographer is to separate your subject from the background. One of the ways to do that is through contrast in value contrast. So make sure the object is lighter than the background or the object is darker than the background. That's a way to separate your subject from the background. So in order to do that, we need to add another mask. So we're going to go ahead and create a new mask. We're going to use the brush tool. And I need to see what size your brush is. Can you put it over the image? That's too big. Okay. We need the brush to be about the size of your nose. Keep going. I would say 3 point, not too far. 2.8 is good. And we're going to leave the feather on there. Feather is a soft edge, so it's hard to see where the brush stops, which is what we want. We don't want to see where the brush stops. We do want it to stop affecting, we don't want it to affect the flag, we want it to only affect her face. So if we look over here, underneath size, feather, flow, density, there's auto mask, and it's currently unchecked. I need you to check that because auto mask allows the computer to then look for the edges of what you're painting on and stop your paintbrush from there. So now Paulina's going to go around the edge of her face and her hair all the way around. And if Lightroom's doing a good job, I should not see any of the red spill over onto the flag. And it should only be touching her hair. All the way down to there. Perfect. All right. There we go. Is everybody able to use the paintbrush mask? Okay, now again, this is working really well for Paulina's image because the light's already there. It's just not quite brightening it enough, so I'm just enhancing what's already in the photograph. Some of you may have made it disappear altogether and you don't have pixel data there, and so it would be hard to do this, but there is pixel data there, so I can actually brighten it. So now that we've painted, we're happy with where the mask is. We're going to go ahead and increase the exposure again. And this time, we are going to increase it to 0.45, 4.5, somewhere around there. Perfect. Okay, we're gonna add some contrast because what exposure does is it brightens everything, and I don't really want the shadows brightened. So we're gonna go ahead and increase the contrast to about 10. Perfect. Okay. So now her face is popping out even more from the background, and I can see it. I wish we could see it before and after, but this is looking better now. And her hair has a little bit of a top glow to it, right? So that light from the heavens is also shining on her head and on her face. Okay, now I also brought out the highlight on her shoulders. So we're gonna grab the paintbrush mask again, but we want it to be a separate mask from the face mask. So we're gonna grab the paintbrush again. Paint around your shoulders and collar. So I'd start about mid-arm. Yeah, that's good. Now since we turned auto masking on, we didn't have to turn on auto masking again. It's going to attempt to find those edges which separates the jacket from the flag. So you don't have to be too careful about painting around those edges. That's pretty good. Okay, and on that one, I actually did the opposite. Let's go ahead and raise that about 0.3 in exposure and 10 on the contrast again. All right, now Paulina is absolutely glowing, right? Okay, we are done in Lightroom. We're gonna now take this into Photoshop. So, how do we do that? We're gonna right-click on the image. Actually, let's go ahead and exit out of the masking. Hit return twice, I think. Yeah, there it goes. So we've exited out of masking. Now we're back to the regular photo. She's going to right-click on the image, and then Edit In is available down here. And then Photoshop is in that submenu. Now here's where we need to pause for a moment and take a look at what it's asking us. We just spent a ton of time editing this in Lightroom. We don't want to, A, send the original to Photoshop because then I'd be messing up the original, because remember Lightroom's non-destructive, Photoshop's destructive, right? I don't want to edit just a copy because the Lightroom adjustments are not going to show up. So I want the top one, which is to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. So this is why I like starting in Lightroom, because even though Photoshop's destructive and we're about to destroy the original image, I'm editing a copy already. Lightroom created a copy for me, and it's actually a hard copy. And so I'm no longer going to screw up her original image. We're going to just be editing a copy with adjustments. So go ahead and hit edit. So that should launch Photoshop for us. All right. Photoshop. Is anybody not in Photoshop yet? Okay, good. Some of you have played around in Photoshop so far, so we're going to reset the interface so that you guys see what I see. So Paulina and everybody go up to Window. Window. Last menu next to Help. Go to Workspace. Okay, so here's the secret. So a lot of Windows users and Chromebook users have a tendency to like to close parts of their interface because they think if they click on the X to close the interface window that you'll quit Photoshop. That's not the way it works on the Mac. You shouldn't do that, you'll mess up your interface. The only way to quit an application on the Mac is to either go to the application menu, Adobe Photoshop 2024, and then go to quit, or right click on the icon in the dock and say quit. So if for some reason you have messed up your work interface, you go to Window Workspace and then Reset Essentials. And that will take it back to the original layout that it was supposed to have. Your layers palette will come back, your tool palette will come back, all of that stuff will come back. Okay, so I had said that Paulina was slightly off center, and due to my OCD, I wanted to center her, right? So how do we do that? We're going to go ahead and start with the object selection tool. So go over to, I think it's currently the quick selection tool on Paulina's screen. Underneath the quick selection tool is the, well, click and hold on the quick selection tool. There we go. Yeah. And the object selection tool is there. Okay, now, Photoshop has gotten 1,000 times better at selecting things. Back when I first started using Photoshop in the 1990s, just 25 years ago, it was a pain in the ass to select things. You would never ever try to select somebody's hair. In fact, when I was designing menus for DVDs at a graphic design firm, selecting hair was so hard that almost everybody had an afro in anything we needed to do, because you had to use a paintbrush to kind of hide the fact that your selection sucked, and it just looked like they had an afro because you had this soft edge brush around it. Anyway, Photoshop's a lot better at selecting things now. So if we click on Paulina like it wants to right now, it selects most of her. Now, it messed up in some places. So I can see it missed part of her neck. I can see it grabbed part of the flag. I can see it missed part of her jacket at the bottom. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to click on Select and Mask at the top. So at the top of the screen is Select and Mask. So I've already selected her, but Select and Mask takes me into this advanced selection mode. That red overlay that she sees, if you don't see it, we're going to correct that right now. So everybody's in Select and Mask, right? Okay. So if we come over to this right-hand side of the screen where it says View Mode, currently under View, so click on the little drop-down arrow there where it says View, hers says Overlay, which means it's got that red overlay to show her what is not selected. Okay? Some of you might have onion skin showing, or marching ants, or black and white. Each one of those is a great way, different way to look at what you've got selected. Sometimes it's hard to see what is selected. So I'm actually going to have Paulina select black and white. There we go. So for me, it's a lot easier to see now what is selected and what's not selected. I was wrong. It actually did select her collar. I thought that was part of the flag, so that part's right. But I can definitely see where her chin's getting messed up. And I can definitely see where there's some transparency around her hair. This is the part that used to be really hard with Photoshop, getting that transparency in the hair. Now it's actually pretty easy. So we're going to start with, if you look on the left-hand side, these are our selection tools now in our advanced Select and Mask. You have 3 different tools up top that are going to be most useful to us now, and that's where I begin. The object selection tool, which we used to get here, that's probably not going to work anymore. We already used the object selection tool. Now we need some more advanced editing. So we're going to start with the quick selection tool, which is the top one. Let's go over to the chin and see if we can get it to sort of add in that area. Okay. It's doing a terrible job. It just gave her a goatee down here, so that wasn't good. Hit Command Z, see if we can undo that. There we go. Okay, so that didn't quite work. I normally like the quick selection tool because, again, it's pretty accurate at selecting edges, but right now it's doing a terrible job. So we're going to switch to this thing that looks like a hand grabbing a brush. That's meant to look like strands of a hair. So if you're trying to select hair, that's a great one for selecting hair because it'll go in between all the little gaps and spaces. We're not trying to do that right now. We're just trying to add her chin back in there. So the regular paintbrush is actually what we want. All right. Your brush size is pretty small, so I'm going to have you increase it. Can I teach you the keyboard shortcut for that? The right square bracket. Whenever you want to change a brush size in Photoshop, Illustrator, Lightroom, etc., the right and left square bracket will increase or decrease the, if you want to know what the square bracket is, it's next to the letter P is the left square bracket, and to the right of that is the right square bracket. So you can see Paulina's brush size is changing as she's pressing the right and left square bracket. Okay. So you can kind of see what we're trying to select there, Paulina.
Yeah.
So try to paint along there and see if you can get it to select well. You may have spilled over, but that's fine. We'll fix it in a second. You want it to drag just along. You want to try to follow the curvature of your neck right there. And if you're scared you might mess up, let go of the mouse button because you can always undo, but if you undo everything, like if you try to paint it all at once,
Yeah.
you'll lose all that you painted. If you do it in small sections, then you only have to miss one of those sections that you undo. All right, so Paulina has a pretty good selection now, I believe. We can verify this. Now this helped us see a high contrast version. There's a little bit of weirdness on her nose, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. We can change the view again. So the high contrast version, the black and white version, showed us exactly what was selected, right? But it's actually hard to see if she missed any part of her neck here, right? Because I can't see neck, all I see is black or white. So if we switch back to the red view, which is the overlay view, now we can kind of see the selection and we can see how that looks. So if you want to touch anything else up there with that brush, you can. If you went to the edge of your nose, it's actually a pretty perfect round shape there that you could, yep, that's perfect. The rest of it actually looks pretty good. Hopefully your selection looks good. You can hit OK. All right, Paulina's currently masked or selected. If we look here, currently we only have one layer, and that's the background. And we're going to need two versions of this in order to make what we're about to do happen. So we're going to take the background layer, make sure you don't deselect anything, make sure she stays selected, otherwise you got to go through that whole process again. We're going to take the background layer, we're going to drag it down to the new layer button, which is next to the trash can icon. Yep. There we go. So she now has a background copy and a background. This is a way to protect yourself. So I can actually create 3 versions if I really wanted to protect the original image. But I don't care because I know in Lightroom I protected the original image that way. So I can create multiple copies. We are going to now mask this one. So since she's selected, if we go down to the bottom of the layers palette, there's a little icon that's a white rectangle with a black dot. Click on that. And look at the layer now. So if you look at the background copy layer in the layers palette, it now has 2 icons instead of 1, correct? One icon is the actual image. The other icon is the mask. And the way a mask works is it basically is like you just cut out her picture. If we click on the eyeball next to the background layer, so the bottom layer, click on the eyeball. The bottom one, not the top. There you go. I can see what she looks like with her mask on. She is masked, right? So this is her isolated from that American flag background, which means I can move her now, right? So that's what I wanted to be able to do. I wanted to move her into the center of the flag. Okay, but there's a problem. Not only is she on this layer, but she's also on the layer below it, meaning that if I move her, I won't have American flag back there, I'll have her back there, and she's going to now be in 2 places instead of 1. That's problematic. So I now have to remove her from the flag background. So let's go ahead and show the background again. In order to do that, we need to be able to reselect her. Now I don't want to have to go through that whole process again. I just want to reselect what I've already selected. Well, since it's saved as a layer mask, I can reselect it right now. So hold down the Command key on your keyboard. Click on the layer mask. And you should notice that it reselects her, right? So that's how you load a selection, that's how you save a selection. So if you are sitting there doing a really complicated selection, you're like, oh crap, the bell's ringing, how do I save this so I don't have to start over again tomorrow? You can save it as a layer mask, reload it, and continue working from there. All right, so we have that selected. Oh, it's saved, so we can hit. So hit Command S, please. We'll finish off what we're about to do tomorrow. And it won't take that long because we're almost done. And then you'll have Thursday, Friday to finish your assignments. What? Good document, please just save it because the document is currently saved. It's finished saving.